You are family now.
Jane's hand trembled as she fumbled through her purse, counting the last of her change at the self-checkout in a bustling New York Walmart. Her baby, Robert, cried in her arms, the soft sound cutting through her exhaustion. She had exactly 12 hours 774, but the total for the formula was 1375 on, $1 short. She knew the cashier's eyes were on her, but the heat in her chest wasn't from the embarrassment. She was just trying to hold it together for Robert. Just as she reached for the diapers to return them, a man's deep voice cut through the tension. "You're short a few dollars," he said, his presence undeniable. Leonardo, a Mafia godfather with a sharp suit and tattoos that told stories of a life she could never understand, stepped forward. "Don't worry," he added, his voice low. "Let me take care of this. You and your son are family now." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Leonardo, a man with the power to change everything, had just crossed the line between a stranger and something far more complicated. It's 2:00 p.m. in New York City, and Jane stands in front of the checkout, her heart racing. Her eyes flicker nervously between the growing line behind her and the checkout total that seems to mock her. Her baby's cries grow louder, a reminder of the crushing pressure she feels as a single mom struggling to make ends meet. She had worked 2 jobs this week, cleaning houses and waitressing, only to find that despite her hard work, it was never quite enough. The weight of Robert's needs, formula, diapers, clothes, were always heavier than her paycheck, leaving her barely scraping by. And now, as she faces the embarrassing moment of not being able to pay, Leonardo, a man who oozes wealth, danger, and power, offers her not only the money she needs, but also a lifeline into a world she never asked for but can't escape. In that one moment, her life pivots. The tension in the air thickens, and Jane's vulnerability is met with something unexpected, a promise of protection, a bond that neither of them can yet understand. As she accepts his help, she can't shake the feeling that this one small act of kindness will lead her into a world of complications, secrets, and a dangerously growing attraction to a man who believes she belongs to him, now and forever. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to our channel and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Enjoy the story. Jane clutched the bags in her hands, her fingers trembling as she made her way to the exit, the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead buzzing louder in her ears. Robert was calm now, his tiny hand gripping her finger, oblivious to the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside her. She'd just had the most bizarre encounter with a stranger. Someone who had paid for her groceries without hesitation, without asking questions. It felt wrong, like she should be refusing, or at least protesting, but instead she had simply accepted the help. The words he had spoken echoed in her mind. "You and your son are family now." She didn't know what that meant, but it made her stomach twist, something between hope and uncertainty. She hadn't let anyone close in so long, certainly not someone like him, someone so out of her league. The idea of letting him help her was uncomfortable, like accepting charity from a stranger, but the heaviness in her chest had lifted just a little bit, and for the first time that day, she didn't feel completely alone. As she reached the doors, ready to head out into the crisp air, a voice stopped her. "Hold on a minute." Jane turned. Leonardo was walking toward her, his polished shoes clicking on the tile floor, his tall figure casting a long shadow across the store. She instinctively stepped back, but he was already in front of her, his presence commanding. "I couldn't just leave you like this," he said, his tone softer now, less authoritative. "I know what it's like to struggle, to feel like you're always a step behind." Jane blinked, unsure of how to respond. She wasn't used to this kind of attention, certainly not from someone like him. He wasn't just any man, he was someone who belonged to a world far beyond her own. He looked like he stepped out of a Mafia movie. But somehow, the menace in his eyes softened when he looked at her, and there was something comforting in his quiet intensity. "I don't need your charity," she said, her voice shaky but firm. I can handle things on my own." Leonardo regarded her quietly, as if weighing her words, before a faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "No one can handle everything alone. Not even me." She felt a pang of something, a mixture of confusion and curiosity. Why was he so insistent? What did he want from her? The skepticism she had built up over the years was still there, pushing her to back away. But there was something about the way he spoke, the kindness hidden beneath the tough exterior, that made it hard to push him away. "I've seen how hard you work, Jane," he continued, his voice steady. "You're doing everything you can for your son, and that's more than enough to earn my help." She looked down at Robert, asleep in her arms, his little chest rising and falling with each breath. She was doing everything for him, but sometimes it didn't feel like enough. "I don't know what to say," Jane murmured, feeling a mix of gratitude and discomfort. "I'm not used to accepting help, especially not from someone like you." Leonardo's eyes softened, and he took a small step closer, lowering his voice. "I'm not asking for anything in return. This isn't about charity, Jane. It's about family, and family looks out for each other." Her breath hitched at his words. The vulnerability in his eyes, the raw honesty, made her question everything she thought she knew about trust and independence. "Thank you," she whispered, the words coming out quieter than she expected. "But I don't know how I could ever repay you." He shrugged, his face unreadable. "Don't worry about that. Just know that you're not alone. You and Robert, you're my family now." The weight of his words hung in the air, settling deep inside her. She had never expected to find this kind of support, not in a stranger, not in someone like Leonardo, but here he was, offering her a lifeline, and for the first time in a long while, she was starting to believe it might be okay to grab onto it. The days after Leonardo's offer of help passed in a blur of quiet gratitude and creeping doubt. Jane couldn't stop thinking about him, the man who had stepped into her life without hesitation, offering both a lifeline and an unsettling sense of security. She'd taken his help, but the weight of it didn't sit right. She should have been more cautious, should have trusted her instincts, the ones that told her to avoid men like him, men with sharp suits and colder smiles. She'd heard stories, of course. The kind of stories that swirled around the city in hushed whispers of Mafia ties, power plays, and the shadows that followed such men. But Leonardo, he didn't seem like the kind of person those stories were about. His demeanor was calm, measured. When he'd helped her in the store, there had been nothing but kindness in his eyes. But now, as she sat at the small kitchen table, her fingers lightly tracing the rim of her coffee mug, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The more she thought about it, the more questions bubbled to the surface. Why had he stepped in so easily? Why had he chosen her of all people, a random woman struggling in the checkout line? No one else had helped, no one had even offered a word of encouragement. It had been Leonardo who came to her rescue, and despite his smooth words and the warmth in his voice, Jane couldn't ignore the nagging suspicion that maybe, just maybe, she had stepped into something far bigger than she was prepared for. The phone buzzed on the table, snapping her from her thoughts. She glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Jane hesitated, then answered, already bracing herself for whatever was coming. "Hello?" "Jane, it's Leonardo," the voice on the other end said, low and steady, just as it always was. "I know this might feel strange, but I wanted to check in. I hope everything's going well for you and Robert." His voice was so reassuring, like a balm to her frayed nerves, but the unease still lingered. "I'm fine," she replied, her voice a little too tight. "Just, adjusting." There was a pause on the line, and Jane could almost hear the way he was studying her, even through the phone. "I understand. It's not easy, Jane," he said. "I know you've been through a lot, and if you ever need anything at all, don't hesitate to reach out." She bit her lip, feeling the pull of his words. The man was offering something she didn't know how to accept. More help, more support from someone who seemed too good to be true. But the stories she'd heard haunted her thoughts. Mafia, criminal networks. And then there was the matter of the tattoos he wore, the ones that peeked out from under his suit cuffs and collar. Symbols she had recognized from those stories. Something dark stirred within her. She couldn't ignore the danger that lingered around him. She wasn't naive. She knew better than to blindly trust a man like Leonardo, no matter how well he dressed or how comforting his voice sounded. But then there was that pull again, that tiny voice telling her she might be overthinking it, that maybe he was just a man trying to help. She shook her head, pushing the thoughts aside. Focus on Robert, she reminded herself. You're doing this for him. Don't let a man like Leonardo distract you from what matters. But the truth was, he already had. He had planted himself in her life, and now, no matter how much he tried to push him away, she couldn't deny the unsettling feeling that the moment she accepted his help, she had also unknowingly accepted something far more dangerous. Over the next few days, Leonardo's presence seemed to find its way into Jane's life more often than she expected. At first, she'd tried to keep her distance, convincing herself that his offer to help was just a one-time thing, a random act of kindness from a stranger who happened to have money to spare. But then he called again, and this time it wasn't just to check in. You've been working hard, Jane. Let me take you and Robert out for dinner. A little break, he suggested, his voice warm, not demanding. She hesitated, her instinct to refuse bubbling up. She didn't want to owe anyone, especially not someone with ties to a world she didn't understand. But she also hadn't had a real break in months. Between cleaning jobs, late nights at the diner, and the constant worry over Robert's needs, she was drained, both physically and emotionally. Just dinner, she said to herself, the words a whisper of justification. It wouldn't hurt to accept one small thing. That evening, she found herself sitting across from Leonardo at a quiet Italian restaurant in the city. The ambiance was upscale, soft jazz playing in the background, the clink of glasses and quiet conversation surrounding them. It felt so out of place for her. She wasn't used to this world, a world of comfort and elegance. But as she sat there, with Robert happily gnawing on a small piece of bread in his high chair, a strange sense of peace settled over her. Leonardo was nothing like the men she had imagined. His demeanor, his quiet strength, it was almost as if he wasn't really trying to impress her. His kindness felt genuine, though his world was still foreign to her. He spoke about everything and nothing, his past, his work, his views on family, each word delivered with a calm intensity. He seemed at ease, while she felt like an imposter in the fine dining setting, her jeans and simple blouse out of place among the polished surroundings. But still, there was something about his presence that was oddly comforting. He didn't ask for anything in return, didn't try to push her into conversations she wasn't ready for. He let her be, letting her take the lead when she could, his silence just as comfortable as his words. As the meal progressed, Jane found herself leaning in more, laughing at his dry sense of humor, her defenses slowly crumbling with each passing minute. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe, not in the way a person feels safe from physical harm, but in the quiet sense that someone was looking out for her. Leonardo's kindness was different. It wasn't a forced gesture or a superficial attempt to win her over. It was simply there, unspoken but powerful. He didn't seem to expect anything in return, which only made her feel more conflicted. Was she being foolish, letting her guard down for a man she barely knew? Or was this just the kindness she had been missing for so long? As they finished the meal, he reached over, touching her hand gently, a simple gesture, but one that sent a ripple of warmth through her chest. "You're not alone in this," he said quietly. His words weren't just a promise of help. They were a quiet affirmation that she was worthy of kindness, that she wasn't as invisible as she often felt. Her heart softened. In that moment, she realized she was starting to believe him, starting to trust him. She wasn't sure where this path would lead, but for the first time in a while, she allowed herself to stop worrying about the future and just breathe. The days blurred together in a haze of late-night shifts, quiet moments with Robert, and the lingering presence of Leonardo. He wasn't just a stranger anymore. Slowly, he became part of her life, an unexpected thread woven into the fabric of her daily routine. It started with small gestures, checking in with her after a long day, sending a message to ask how Robert was doing, offering her help when she least expected it. There was no pressure, no strings attached, just a steady presence that became harder to ignore. The thing that confused her the most was the way he made her feel. Leonardo wasn't just kind, he was attentive. He listened to her, truly listened, as if her words mattered. He would ask her about Robert's latest milestone, remembering the smallest details she shared, always making her feel seen in a world that often felt too big and overwhelming. And when he smiled at her, really smiled, there was a warmth in his eyes that made her heart skip. It wasn't just the smile of a man offering charity or a businessman trying to get ahead. It was the smile of someone who genuinely cared, someone who, despite his world of power and danger, saw her for who she was, a mother doing her best. But Jane didn't know what to make of it. She was scared. And she wasn't sure if it was because of the overwhelming kindness he showed, or because of the constant undercurrent of something deeper, something she wasn't sure she was ready to face. The attraction was there, undeniable, and it scared her more than she cared to admit. She tried to push it away, burying her fears beneath the practicalities of her life. She had a son to take care of, a future to build. She didn't need complications, especially not someone like Leonardo. He came from a world she didn't understand, a world of power and shadows. She didn't belong there, and the thought of getting too close made her uncomfortable. What would it mean for Robert? Would they ever truly be safe? Could she trust him? But then there were moments, like the one last night, when everything else faded away. She'd been sitting at home, exhausted after another grueling day, when Leonardo showed up at her door unannounced. He hadn't even said anything, just stood there with a quiet understanding in his eyes, holding a small bag of groceries. "I thought you might need this," he said, his voice low. "I know it's not much, but I want to help." She didn't have words for the rush of emotion that flooded her. Gratitude, frustration, something that felt like longing. She let him in, Robert asleep in his crib, and the two of them sat in the small kitchen, talking about everything and nothing at all. He didn't try to fix her problems or tell her what to do. He just was there, offering support in the way she had always needed, even if she hadn't known it. The more time she spent with him, the more she found herself drawn to him, not just for the help he provided, but for the way he made her feel safe. Safe enough to let her guard down, even just a little. Safe enough to show him the side of herself she usually kept hidden, the tired, overwhelmed mother who was doing her best but felt like she was drowning. But the question still lingered. What did he want from her? Was she just a project to him, a stray he could rescue? Or was there something more between them, something neither of them could ignore? As they parted that night, a soft kiss brushed her cheek, a simple, tender gesture that sent a shiver through her. Her heart raced as he pulled away, leaving her standing in the door, more uncertain than ever, yet undeniably connected to him in a way she hadn't expected. It started with small moments that Jane tried to dismiss, an unexpected touch on her arm as they passed each other, a lingering glance that made her heart skip, the way he seemed to see right through her walls. But as time went on, the connection between her and Leonardo deepened, growing stronger in ways she couldn't control. Every time he reached out to her, whether it was a thoughtful gesture or a quiet word, she felt something in her chest tighten with both longing and fear. She hadn't meant to let it happen, but here she was, feeling more and more drawn to him. They spent more time together, each encounter leaving her both shaken and breathless. There was something about the way Leonardo looked at her, the way he seemed to understand her without needing her to explain anything. With him, Jane didn't have to pretend she had it all figured out. She could simply be, and that scared her more than she cared to admit. One evening, after a long day of work, she found herself sitting with him on the small balcony of her apartment, the city lights stretching out before them. Robert was asleep inside, the quiet hum of the apartment a stark contrast to the world outside. Leonardo was close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, his presence like a quiet storm, calm but intense, pulling her in. They were talking about everything and nothing, and yet Jane couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was starting to unfold between them. "You know," Leonardo said, his voice soft, "I didn't expect to find someone like you, Jane." His words caught her off guard, and she looked up at him, the vulnerability in his eyes something she hadn't expected. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice quiet, almost hesitant. "Someone who's strong, but still knows how to care," he said, his gaze never leaving hers. "Someone who doesn't hide behind walls, even when the world makes it hard to let them down." She felt a flush of heat on her cheeks. "I don't know about that," she said, shaking her head. "I've had to learn to keep it together for Robert. I don't know how to do anything else." Leonardo's expression softened, and he reached out, his hand brushing hers. "That's exactly why I admire you," he said, his voice low. "You keep going, even when it feels like everything is falling apart." His words lingered in the space between them, filling her with a warmth that was both comforting and unsettling. Jane found herself drawn to him, not just for the help he'd given her, but for the man he was, the way he spoke to her with such kindness, the way he listened to her with intent. She had never had someone like him in her life, and the more she allowed herself to feel it, the harder it became to push him away. But the fear was still there, gnawing at her. She could feel the pull between them, but she also knew the complications his world might bring. She didn't belong there, not in the shadow of his power, not in the dangerous world of the Mafia. What would that mean for Robert, for her? "I'm not sure I can keep doing this," she said, her voice barely a whisper, though her heart was racing. "You're not like anyone I've ever known, and I'm afraid of where this might lead." Leonardo's eyes softened, and he gently cupped her face in his hand. "I'm not asking you to change anything, Jane," he said quietly. "I just want to be here. For you. For Robert." For a moment she closed her eyes, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to let go of the fear and just be with him, but the danger of it all, the risk of her heart and her safety, still held her back. As she opened her eyes to look at him again, the uncertainty lingered, but so did the pull. The closer they got, the harder it became to keep pretending she didn't feel it. It was a crisp evening when Jane's world shifted again. She had agreed to meet Leonardo for dinner, nothing formal, just a quiet meal at a small Italian restaurant he frequented. The kind of place where the waiters knew your name and the food was always impeccable. They shared a bottle of wine, and for a few hours everything felt normal, even comforting. But as the evening wore on, something changed in Leonardo's demeanor. The easy conversation and soft laughter turned into moments of tense silence, his attention flickering to the door every now and then as if he was waiting for something. Jane felt the shift immediately. She didn't know what was happening, but she could see it in the way Leonardo's jaw tightened and the way his eyes narrowed with purpose. When the waiter brought their bill, Leonardo stood up abruptly, his hand sliding into his coat pocket. "I have to take care of something," he said, his voice clipped as though the words were more for himself than for her. Are you okay?" Jane asked, confusion creeping into her voice. Leonardo gave her a quick glance, the flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "Stay here," he said. "I'll be back in a minute." Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving Jane staring after him. The silence of the restaurant felt heavier now, the hum of conversation around her more distant. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her mind racing with thoughts she couldn't seem to control. What was going on? Leonardo wasn't just a businessman. She knew that much. But what was he involved in? The hints he'd dropped about his work, The way people seemed to know him, the coldness in his gaze when he talked about taking care of things. It all pointed to a world Jane hadn't seen, one she wasn't sure she wanted to be part of. Her thoughts were interrupted when the door to the restaurant opened and Leonardo reappeared, flanked by two men. They were large, dressed in dark suits, their faces unreadable. Jane's stomach turned as she watched them approach, a chill running down her spine. The men exchanged quiet words with Leonardo, and he nodded, his posture rigid, commanding. They weren't just acquaintances, they were his people, men who respected him in a way that made her uneasy. Leonardo's eyes met hers as he returned to the table. "It's nothing to worry about," he said quickly, as if sensing her discomfort. "Just a minor business matter. I won't be long." The words were meant to reassure, but they did the opposite. Jane watched him closely, her mind swirling with the pieces of the puzzle that were beginning to form. This was the world he was part of, the world of power, of control, of danger, the world of the Mafia. The men who came with him, their eyes never leaving him, the quiet tension between them, it was all so foreign to her, so unlike anything she had ever known. As Leonardo continued talking, Jane couldn't shake the fear that was settling in her chest. She had wanted something more for herself and Robert, something better, something safer, but now, as she looked at him, her protector, her confounding magnetic protector, she realized that the price for that better life wasn't just money or comfort. It was something darker. And with that realization came the sharp sting of reality. She was becoming entangled in a world she didn't understand, and the closer she got to Leonardo, the more she feared she would lose herself in it. "Are you sure everything is okay?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Leonardo's eyes softened for a moment, his hand resting gently on hers. "I promise you, Jane, I'll never let anything happen to you, to Robert." But his words felt hollow in the face of the reality she was beginning to see. The world he inhabited was dangerous. And no matter how much he cared for her, she couldn't shake the feeling that the deeper she got involved with him, the more it would cost her. Her heart ached as she realized how far she had already gone, how much she had already given away, and yet, as she looked at him, she couldn't bring herself to walk away. Maybe she was fooling herself, but she couldn't imagine letting go of the one person who had made her feel seen. Made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone in this world. The weight of the decision settled heavily on Jane's shoulders as she sat in the quiet of her apartment, the soft hum of the city filtering through the window. Robert was asleep in his crib, his small body curled up beneath the soft blanket, completely unaware of the turmoil swirling inside her. She had always prided herself on being independent, on handling everything on her own. But now, with Leonardo in her life, the lines between what she could control and what she couldn't had become blurred. The phone buzzed on the table. Her heart skipped when she saw Leonardo's name on the screen. For the past week, things between them had been tense, the unsaid words hanging in the air like a storm cloud. She had avoided him, unsure of how to navigate the growing feelings she had for him and the fear that clung to her like a shadow. She wasn't naive enough to think she could keep her distance forever, but the thought of getting too close, to someone like him, someone with ties to a world so dangerous, made her skin crawl. She picked up the phone, her fingers trembling as she swiped to answer. "Jane." Leonardo's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "We need to talk. I'll be at your place in 20 minutes. The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She didn't need to ask what he wanted to talk about. She had already sensed it coming. The choice, the confrontation, it was inevitable. She could feel the tension rising between them like a storm that was about to break. She put the phone down and walked to the kitchen, her mind racing. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about Robert, too. She couldn't afford to make a mistake. The deeper she allowed herself to get involved with Leonardo, the more she risked her heart, her safety, and the stability she had fought so hard to create for her son. But the other side of it, the part that terrified her even more, was that the more time she spent with him, the more she found herself falling for him. A knock at the door startled her, and she froze. There was no turning back now. When she opened the door, Leonardo stood there, his presence filling the doorway like a storm. He didn't say anything at first, his eyes scanning her face, reading her, waiting. Jane felt the weight of the moment pressing in on her chest, the silence thick with unspoken words. "I can't keep doing this," she finally said, the words escaping before she could stop them. Her voice cracked, betraying the uncertainty she was trying to hide. "I can't keep living in fear, wondering if I'm making the right choice." Leonardo stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm not asking you to live in fear," he said quietly, his voice soft but firm. "I'm asking you to trust me. Trust that I will protect you, that I will protect Robert." Her heart raced. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust him, but there was always that nagging voice in the back of her mind, telling her that this world wasn't for her, that she would never belong in it. The stakes were too high, and the price was something she wasn't sure she could pay. "I don't know what to do," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't know if I can trust you." Leonardo took a step closer, his hand reaching out to gently touch her arm. "You don't have to decide everything now, Jane. But you need to make a choice. Stay with me, and I'll give you everything you need. A future, a life. Or you walk away, and you do it on your own. But you can't keep running from this." The tension in the room grew thick, the choice hanging between them like a fragile thread. Jane's mind raced, her heart torn between fear and desire, between the safety of her independence and the pull of something she wasn't sure she was ready for. The silence stretched on, the weight of the decision settling in her chest. Finally, with a shaky breath, she looked up at him, meeting his eyes. "I don't know if I can have you in my life, Leonardo," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm scared of what will happen if I don't try." He didn't say anything, just reached out, cupping her face in his hands, his eyes softening with understanding. "You don't have to be afraid," he said quietly. "I'm not going anywhere." And in that moment, Jane realized the truth. She had already made her choice. It had been weeks since Jane made the choice to step into the unknown, and with each passing day, she found herself more and more entwined in the world that Leonardo had offered her. The fear that once held her back had slowly faded, replaced by a quiet certainty. She had no illusions about the life they were leading. It was far from perfect, but it was real, and it was hers. She sat on the couch, Robert nestled beside her, his tiny hands clutching his favorite stuffed animal, and watched as Leonardo moved around the room, his presence filling the space in a way she had come to rely on. The apartment, once filled with the weight of her solitude, now felt different. There was laughter in the air, soft and easy, as they shared simple moments together, moments that made her realize what she had been missing all along. The life she had fought so hard to build was no longer just hers to carry. It was theirs. "You're quiet tonight," Leonardo said, sitting beside her, his voice gentle. He had been more thoughtful these days, more present. There was a softness to him when he was with them that she hadn't expected, a side of him that wasn't defined by the world he came from. He had become more than just a protector. He was a partner, a steady force in their lives, a man who made her feel safe enough to let her guard down. "I've been thinking," Jane replied, her voice quiet but sure, "about everything. About us. I never imagined this kind of life, you know. I thought I'd always be on my own, just trying to make it through another day." She turned to look at him, her eyes soft but earnest. "But now, with you, with Robert, I see that family isn't just about who you're born to. It's about who you choose, who chooses you, and how you love and trust each other." Leonardo's gaze softened as he listened, and he reached for her hand, his touch warm and steady. "You're right. Family isn't just blood. It's the people who show up when you need them the most, people who support you, who build you up instead of tearing you down." She nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest. Her fears of his world, of the dangers he was tied to, had not disappeared. They still lingered in the background like a shadow she couldn't fully escape. But for the first time, she didn't feel the need to run from them. She had learned to trust him, not just because of the safety he provided, but because of the quiet way he showed up for her every single day. And it wasn't just him. It was the people he brought into her life, the friends who had become like family, the unexpected support that came from a group she had never imagined herself a part of. The Hells Angels, with their rough edges and hard exteriors, had shown her that family wasn't about appearances or stereotypes. They were a group of people who had all found their way through their own struggles, and now they were lifting her up. "I never thought I'd say this," Jane continued, her voice thick with emotion, "but I'm starting to believe in this. In us. In this family." Leonardo smiled, the weight of the past few weeks settling into his bones as he squeezed her hand. "We've always been a family, Jane. You just didn't know it yet." And as they sat there together, with Robert asleep in her arms and Leonardo beside her, Jane felt something shift inside her. For the first time in a long while, she felt at peace. This was her family now, unexpected, unconventional, but built on love, trust, and mutual support. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid of what came next. She was ready.